children, I am Dr. Pallavi Patnaik and I welcome you all to another interesting episode of EduSat. In this particular episode, we will learn about translation. Translating a particular subject from Odia to something in English is often difficult. It may be any subject, it may be a para, it may be a line, it may be sentences, it is often difficult and vice versa. So, let me in this particular episode tell you why translation is necessary, what are the tricks and tips by which you will be able to translate properly and correctly, and then we shall do a few exercises. So, children, why is translation necessary, or what is it that makes translation indispensable? What is translation? Let us understand the concept first. Translation is the skillful act of recreating an equivalent message of a work of art originally created in one language in another language. For example, there may be a particular sentence in Odia and you want to convey the same meaning in English. When you do that, you are translating a particular Odia sentence into English. So, from one language into another language, but the meaning of it and the essence of the sentence remains the same. That is translation. Now, why do we translate, or why should we translate? Why should we do it? Look at the reasons. To affect larger audiences. If in our state we look at the general population, most of the people understand Odia. So, if the articles are written in English, if English is the only language used, they will face lots of difficulties. So, if we know how to translate properly, we can translate the English content into Odia, whereby our people can understand well. Therefore, we will have a larger audience. What is the second reason? Promoting mother tongues. There are so many valuable texts in English, but people who are not that fluent or conversant with English language will find it difficult to read, enjoy and go through those texts. So, we should promote our mother tongue by translating those pieces into Odia, whereby common people would be able to enjoy the valuable works. Now, reviving dying languages. Supposing there are many tribes in our nation whose language is on the verge of extinction. So, what can we do? We can translate important works in English into those native languages so as to preserve that language. And historical changes in languages can also be observed through translation. Now, look at this particular flow chart. It just gives you a brief idea about translation, though this is not very much needed for your examination purpose. To help you have an all-round idea about the basics of translation, I am depicting this particular flow chart. Now, in translation, we have two kinds of emphasis. The first is a source language emphasis and then is the target language emphasis. When we talk about translation, we classify it into two categories. The first is the source language emphasis and the other is the target language emphasis. For example, if we are translating an English text into Odia, the source is the English language and we are targeting a particular language which is Odia. So, what is the source language emphasis? Word for word, literal translation, faithful translation, semantics. So, these are the features of source language emphasis. The source language which we will translate for the target audiences, it should have a word for word translation, it should have literal translation, the meaning and the phonetics of the particular text which is being translated should remain the same. And what is target language emphasis? There we have adaptation, there we have freedom and dynamics, there we have literary and idiomatic sequences. Okay? Now, this is the most important of all slides in this particular segment because it deals with the tricks and tips of translation. What should you do while translating so that your work from one language into another is appropriately and grammatically corrected form of translation? How you should do it? You should be concise. Now, what do you mean by being concise? You should start with simple, clear and formal sentences and phrases. Okay? You should keep the sentences short, limiting them up to 50 to 20 words for best results. If a sentence contains multiple ideas, thoughts, you should break them down into one sentence per idea or thought. You should avoid unnecessarily complicated words and sentences. Tricks and tips of translation. These are the tricks and tips of translation which would help you to translate any sort of English text into Odia and vice versa comfortably. So, the first point was be precise. Now, the second point, write clearly and formally. So, what do you see in this particular sentence? Word your documents in such a way so as to avoid idioms, colloquial expressions and slang. When you have to translate idioms, colloquial expressions and cliches, you should avoid doing so and you should write in such a way so that the essence of the sentence remains the same, but you do not have to translate idioms, cliches, colloquial expressions or slangs. Now, consider the literal meaning of words and try to express this instead. Translation is all about expression. If you are able to express a sentence correctly, obviously you have learnt the art to translate. Avoid ambiguity. This is a very big tip. What you should do? You should avoid ambiguity. How should you do it? Try not to use words that have more than one meaning. For example, I have given you a particular example. Use movie instead of film. Use painting or photograph instead of picture. Now, words ending in ing can sometimes be ambiguous, such as rowing, which can be a noun or a verb. See, you should be very clear about what you are translating. Film can mean anything. It can be a photographic film or it could refer to a motion film. So, use the word movie for a motion film and use the word film for a photographic film, but simply just don't use a common word. Similarly, use painting or photographs instead of a picture. Now, always check spelling and grammar. This is the most important part. You should be very clear, you should not be ambiguous, you should be concise. And what you should be? You should be very particular about checking spelling and grammar. Why? Because incorrect spelling or grammar leads to many translation errors. For example, if a word is spelled incorrectly, the translator will not be able to identify the word. And what is the next point? We should include appropriate accents. What do we mean by that? Always use the correct accent marks in your text. Be aware of punctuation pitfalls. Avoid use of complicated punctuation marks such as parenthesis and bracket signs. You should be very careful about these punctuation marks. Okay? You should generally try to avoid them. Now, avoid abbreviations, or if you need to use them, keep them consistent. Use articles in front of listed items. For example, instead of the judge and jury, use the judge and the jury. Do not leave words out. Some words can be implied in everyday use such as that, which, who, etc. and are often omitted while writing of the text. Try not to do this as they may be required in the target language. Now, why is it considered difficult to translate from English to Odia? It is often said that English is a difficult language to learn and translate. For the speakers of Indian languages, translating from English is much more difficult than translating from Indian languages because the Indian languages share certain common sentence patterns and also share an amount of vocabulary due to their Sanskrit origin. Usually, translators face problems in regards to the following areas. So, where are you most likely to face problems? You are most likely to face problems when you are translating sentences into Odia. Okay? I have given you a few exercises to translate. I have put an English sentence first and then written its appropriate translation in Odia so that you can see how the subject, object and the verbs are placed appropriately, how nouns can be used, how phrasal verbs can be used. So, let us look at the examples one by one. I can put this potato easily into the can. ମୁଁ ଏହି ଆଳୁଟିକୁ ସହଜରେ ଏହି ଟିଣ ଡବା ଭିତରେ ଭର୍ତ୍ତି କରିପାରିବି. So, look how the subject, how the object and how the supporting verbs are easily placed. The buzzing of the bees woke me up from my sleep. So, what will be the Odia translation? ମହୁମାଛି ମାନଙ୍କର ଗୁଞ୍ଜନ ମୋତେ ନିଦରୁ ଉଠାଇ ଦେଲା. Look at how the verb is used. Look at how the subjects and the objects are being used. The tale about the monkey's tail was very interesting. ମାଙ୍କଡ଼ର ଲାଞ୍ଜ ସମ୍ପର୍କିତ ଗପଟି ଭାରି ବଢ଼ିଆ ହୋଇଥିଲା. See, it is not necessary the part which is there in the initial half of the sentence has to be translated first. No, in Odia sometimes the subject comes to the initial phase. So, what is the subject? The monkey's tail. Yes, it was a story about the monkey's tail. So, the monkey's tail comes first. ମାଙ୍କଡ଼ର ଲାଞ୍ଜ ସମ୍ପର୍କିତ ଗପଟି ଭାରି ବଢ଼ିଆ ହୋଇଥିଲା. See how the subject is placed, see how the object is placed and how we connect the sentence to make it grammatically correct. Now, the screen of the monitor is not clean. Monitor ର ପରଦା ସଫା ନାହିଁ. The bishop declared the poor man innocent. How will you translate this? Bishop ଗରିବ ଲୋକଟିକୁ ନିର୍ଦୋଷ ଘୋଷଣା କଲେ. The mewing of the cats in the morning is not considered auspicious. ସକାଳେ ବିରାଡ଼ି ମାନଙ୍କର ବୋବେଇବାକୁ ଅଶୁଭ ଧରାଯାଏ. The distant sight of the sight is not appealing. Here the second word sight refers to a place. So, how will you translate this sentence? ସ୍ଥାନଟି ଦୂରରୁ ଦେଖିବାକୁ ଆକର୍ଷଣୀୟ ନୁହେଁ. Who knows when the satellite would reach Mars? ଉପଗ୍ରହ ମଙ୍ଗଳ ଗ୍ରହରେ କେବେ ପହଞ୍ଚିବ କିଏ ଜାଣିଛି? Look at this, how the question is framed. What can I do if none except you accept my proposal? ଯଦି ତୁମ ଛଡ଼ା ଆଉ କେହି ମୋ ପ୍ରସ୍ତାବ ଗ୍ରହଣ ନ କରେ ମୁଁ କ'ଣ କରିପାରିବି? I have to book my tickets in advance. ମୋତେ ମୋ ଟିକେଟ ଅଗ୍ରିମ ବୁକିଂ କରିବାକୁ ପଡ଼ିବ. So, this is how we translate from English into Odia. If you learn the tricks and tips of how to translate difficult English sentences into appropriate Odia, you can do the same vice versa. So, let us see what we have in the next upcoming slide. So, what do we see in the next slide? Translation and parts of speech. What are the parts of speech? All of you would be knowing. Nouns, adjectives, verbs, adverbs and prepositions. How do we deal with translation and parts of speech? First, let us deal with nouns. Some nouns have exact equivalent in both the languages, but some do not have exact equivalents. For example, the phrase newly born child, when translated in Odia, becomes Navjat Sishu, danced beautifully becomes Bahut Sundar Nachila. So, the first phrase is a noun phrase where we have noun preceded by a participle adjective, whereas in the next verb phrase, we have a verb which is followed by an adverb. Now, look at the intricacies. Look at the first sentence and look at the second sentence. In the translated phrases in Odia, we have the participle adjective which is always placed before the noun, but the adverb will go after the verb. So, children, remember where the adverb goes after the verb, where the participle adjective is placed, where the noun phrase is placed, and how they are interconnected to make a sentence sound grammatically correct. How do we deal with verbs? In translation, how do we deal with verbs? Now, it is very difficult to understand the intricacies and complexities of English language, but when these rules arbitrarily change, most of the translators will face problems. Most of the regular English verbs have the past tense in the normal pattern. Look, most of the regular English verbs have the past tense in the normal pattern and are easy to predict. Pick becomes picked, becomes accepted. Now, add becomes added, accept becomes accepted, add becomes added. So, you just have to add an ed. When it is in English, pick will become picked, accept will become accepted and add will become added. But still there are many verbs which are irregular in their forms and often confuse Odia speakers who want to translate them into Odia. Yes? So, verbs having similar forms in all the tense forms like put, cut, hit, there are so many examples, they are the most confusing. Unless one has a clear understanding of the context, you cannot translate the verb in the correct tense form. Look at one particular example. In English, if we look at the sentence, what does it say? Children cut the cake into 3 pieces. Okay. What is the Odia translation for this particular line? Pilamane cake tiku tini khondare kattile. We use the past tense first, but when we use the present tense, ame kona likhiba? Pilamane cake tiku tini khondare kattanti. But when we are using the past tense, ame likhiba pilamane cake tiku tini khondare kattile. Yes? So, pilamane cake tiku tini khondare kattile will be the past tense and kattanti will be the present tense. We should always be very careful while translating verbs because they have multiple meanings, particularly opposite meanings. The word dust, for example, can be used to mean to remove dust and to put dust or powder over a particular object. Now, look at the English sentence and its translation in Odia. Okay, look at one particular sentence in English. We should dust the room before we occupy it. यार ओडिया ट्रांसलेशन टा कौन होबो पिला माने? एही कोठरी रे रहिबा पूर्वरु आमे एहाकु सफा करिबा उचित. This is the proper Odia translation. Now, if someone uses the other meaning like to put powder over an object, what will be the translation? if someone uses the other meaning to translate the word dust, it will have an improper meaning, a ridiculous meaning, which will be this. एही कोठरी रे रहिबा पूर्वरु आमे एहा उपरे धूली बिंचिबा उचित, which is wrong. So you see why we should be careful while translating verbs. Now prepositions. Likewise, prepositions in English become postpositions in Odia. Look at the following examples and then you will understand how it is done. In this particular row, I have given you examples in English, and in the second row, I have translated them into Odia. So look at the first translation, in the temple, mandiro bhitere or mandirore. Secondly, on the table, table uppare. Across the river, nai araparire. Since the morning, sokkalo tharu. Towards the school, school adaku. Now children, let us look at the next slide. In this particular slide, we will be translating words and phrases into English. Translation of subjects, objects and how they are placed in the correct sequence so as to make a sentence sound grammatically correct was explained to you in the previous slide. Now let us translate the following words and phrases into English. A beautiful birthday gift. तार translation from English into Odia केमिति होबो पिला माने? एक सुंदर जन्मदिन उपहार. मु जदि तुमको एबे एक सुंदर जन्मदिन उपहार देई देबी and तुमको कहिबी तार English translation करो, what will you get? A beautiful birthday gift. Similarly, bangle stand को how will I translate into Odia? चूड़ी stand. किंबा मु जदि चूड़ी stand लिखि देबी मु एहा को English रे केमती translate करिबी? Bangle stand. The headman of the village. गाँ मुखिया. Horse riding अश्व चालना. My sister's classmate मो भौणीर सहपाठिनी. Like I told you, during the tricks and tips of translation, we should be literal, we should stick to the words, literal meaning of the words. So, my sister's classmate, my will be mo, sisters will be bhonira, classmate would be सहपाठिनी किंबा तमे सांग मध्य यूज करि पारो. Similarly, horse riding को हमें केमिति translate करिबा? अश्व चालना. Now, country made, देसी. Localization, स्थानीकरण. The most unwanted food item, सबुठारु बेसी अवांछित खाद्य द्रव्य. पिला माने देखो मु तुमको ए ओडिया सेंटेंस टा भी देई पारे, तुमको कहि पारे इंग्लिश को ट्रांसलेट करो. ट्रांसलेशन यू शुड लर्न बोथ वेज. इंग्लिश टा को ओडिया रे ट्रांसलेट करिवो एंड ओडिया को इंग्लिश रे ट्रांसलेट करिवो. If you learn it both ways, it is only then that you will be thorough. मु तुमको examples देइछि. तमे कोन करि परिबो? तम कॉपीज रे ओडिया शब्दटी को लिखि दबो एंड तार सॉल्यूशन न देखि किंबा ए स्लाइड टा को न देखि कि इन फ्यूचर तुमे माने से ओडिया शब्दटी को एप्रोप्रिएटली इंग्लिश रे ट्रांसलेट करिबा को चेष्टा करिवो. ताहाले जना पड़िबो भूलटा तुम माने कोठी करूच, को एरियाटा तमे जानी पारुन, तुमको ग्रामर ट्रांसलेट करिबारे असुविधा होची किंबा तुमको सेंटेंस टा को फ्रेम करिबारे असुविधा होची. तमे जानी पारुन नाउन कोठी रहिबो, वर्ब कोठी रहिबो, प्रेपोजिशन कोठी रहिबो, फ्रेजल वर्ब टा केमती ट्रांसलेट हबो. इफ यू डू ऑल दीज ट्रांसलेशंस योरसेल्फ, तुमको जोटा सुविधा लागिला प्रथमे इंग्लिश रे लिखिदेव, ता मीनिंग टा ओडिया रे लिखिबो. तापरे इन अ सेकेंड सेट ऑफ एक्सरसाइज किछि गोडा ओडिया शब्द लिखिजिबो, ताकू इंग्लिश रे ट्रांसलेट करिबा को चेष्टा करिबो. तुम माने पिला माने तमे नाउन टा को कोठी रखिबो, एडवर्ब टा को कोठी रखिबो, एडजेक्टिव टा को कोठी रखिबो, फ्रेजल वर्ब टा को कोठी रखिबो, सेई दिनस गुडिक भलरे मने रखिबो. सब्जेक्ट केमती रहिबो, ऑब्जेक्ट केमती रहिबो, ऑक्सिलरी और हेल्पिंग वर्ब्स कोठी रहिबे, एडजेक्टिव टा पास्ट पार्टिसिपल और पास्ट टेंस को केमिति कनेक्ट हबे, ए जिनस गुड़िक जदि तुमे भल भाबरे मन रखिबो ट्रांसलेशन रे केबे भी भूल करिबो नाही. So I hope you would have sincerely taken into account the tricks and tips for proper translation. You can practice all of these exercises yourself and go through other exercises that have been provided to you in different test papers and textbooks. We shall meet again in another upcoming episode of EduSat. Thank you.